Hi, good morning, everyone. And well, it is still Happy New Year. It is still Chinese or the Lunar New Year as we know it. Today is the 12th day, I think. Right. But anyway, I'm really excited that we are continuing the great momentum. This is actually already the 7th episode of Scaling in APAC. We are very privileged and excited to have all of you joining us on this call, on this webinar. And for some of you who may be here for the first time, Scaling in APAC is actually a program put together by MediaShock, the company I run, and Scaler, the company that my partner in crime, Colin, runs. Right? We want this program to be a program where we help startup founders, scale-up founders who are keen to grow in APAC. And this is done by sharing the knowledge of those who have fought the battle. So all the guests that we've brought on the show so far have real battle scars. Right, so they are sharing their real life journey, and hopefully with all these real life learnings, we can shortcut your own growth in APAC. So whether you're just starting to explore to grow in the Southeast Asia region or to grow in the larger APAC market where it is actually the largest and fastest growing region in the world, we want to help you tap and expand on these opportunities. So you can bring forth your innovative ideas and succeed in a diverse market of APAC. Right. So I have a really influential partner in Colin, who painstakingly put together this series alongside with me. So I will introduce, maybe I'll get my partner in crime, right, to introduce himself and his company Scaler to. I think most people will know who Scaler is, but I'll hand the time over to my partner in crime, Colin, to share a little bit about what Scaler does.
Thank you, partner in crime. So I am one of the co-founders of Scaler. I would describe myself as a serial entrepreneur and workaholic. The core of what my business does is we help technology companies to reach their potential and scale. We help with recruitment, we help with go-to-market, we help with the entire spectrum of what a technology company would need to go from good to spectacular. We're a global company. We're in 9 markets. We've worked with about 500 technology businesses, 48 unicorns, the vast majority of which we've helped to expand into Asia Pacific. And we're deeply inspired by some of the most successful companies that we've worked with, Deal, Wix, Forta, Amazon Web Services, that we bring a lot of our knowledge and combine it to help, I guess, our clients implement what best practice looks like to succeed in what is, in my opinion, the most exciting region of the world, but also the most complex region of the world. So that's a little bit about myself and my shameless plug for Scaler, and I'll hand it over to my partner in crime, Ming Song.
Right. So for us, MediaShock, we are a content and video agency, and we help companies, especially in the tech space, communicate these complex ideas in an effective and engaging manner. Right. There's lots of things happening. People hear a lot, but what's more important is it engages them. And coupled with the fact that APAC or Asia is a very diverse market. There's so many different languages, there's so many different regions, and people understand it very differently. So when you head into APAC, localization and understanding how to speak in a manner that these people can resonate with is very crucial. So this is something that we help scale-ups do very well in this part of the region. So we obviously do this via multiple languages, but importantly, get into the cultural aspect of things. So that when you decide to scale and you want to succeed, working with a partner like us will help you do it fast and quick. Right? So it is our very privilege to invite these esteemed speakers. Today we have a very insightful leader. I have had the opportunity to speak with him a couple of times, and each and every time I was blown away. He has not only led and worked in position that's really inspiring, and that's a good friend that Colin has worked with for a while. I'll leave for Colin to share with us a little bit more about who Dane Hudson is.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. I don't really know where to actually start with the platitudes because of how highly I respect Dane Hudson. Dane Hudson is one of the most successful executives that I've ever met. At one time, I believe he was managing upwards of 400,000 individuals. He's been featured in various financial review articles. And then he took his learnings from growing a business, running teams that were of that size, and he became, the way what he describes, and I think it's an amazing saying, Asia Pacific's most in-demand executive coach. So he works with 4 of the largest venture capital funds in Asia Pacific. He works with a number of the most influential CEOs, and he guides people on impactful leadership. So that's both VCs, their portfolio companies, highly successful technology executives, and it's combining what global best practice looks like to be able to achieve peak performance and to be able to lead organizations. I think the guy is absolutely amazing, and thank you so much for coming in and having this chat to us, Dane. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Let's welcome Dane Hudson. I know that everybody here is going to get a lot of value from this session, so that's my take on Dane Hudson.
Thanks for that generous introduction. So what I decided I'd talk about today is just a few of the sort of topics that really resonate with a lot of the CEOs and founders that I mentor. I've been very privileged over the last 4 or 5 years where I've worked with around 60 startup founders across Southeast Asia. And I found these 3 particular topics resonate really well with them as they think about their leadership journey. So the first thing I just wanted to share was that when you're a leader, it's particularly useful to think about your life journey as a critical part of your leadership journey. And that's pretty obvious enough when you think about when you're younger, you see your parents, you learn how to be a little bit of a leader at school, maybe you've got a captain of a class, or you see other leaders at school, then you get to university, maybe the first job. But interestingly, a lot of people then stop on the journey of being, I suppose, deliberate in observing leaders. I really encourage CEOs to sort of maintain this student of leadership concept throughout their whole career. Now, I'm a little bit odd. So when I turn back the clock to my first job when I was in my early 20s, I decided I really wanted to become a student of leadership, and I knew I needed to grow and there was lots to learn. So what I did is I created an Excel spreadsheet, and for the next 15 years, every boss that I worked for, I would put, these are the characteristics that impressed me, that impacted me, that motivated me, and then I'd put on the right-hand side those characteristics or behaviours that actually didn't work for me. And over time, I just accumulated and identified behaviours that really great leaders execute. Now, you need to be able to confidently and authentically copy those behaviours. And sometimes, you can't copy a behaviour because it's just not authentically you. So it's really important on your journey to observe other leaders and think about, firstly, how they impacted you, how they made you feel, and whether in fact there's something there that you've learned that you could use in your own leadership behaviours. So again, the first message I would challenge people to think about is think about your leadership journey and remaining a student of leadership. Continue to observe, reflect, and evolve your own leadership. So that would be concept number 1 I would suggest you all. The next thing I wanted to talk about were leadership characteristics. And this is something that a list that I've created over, 20 years. And it's characteristics that I see great leaders execute. And so let me just walk through a number of those. So the first one is, a leader is a person of hope. So I love action movies. So one of my favorite action movies is Gladiator. The first Gladiator with Russell Crowe, and I think he was Maximus Aurelius. And as a general in battle, he would always be out front. Same thing with Braveheart, with Mel Gibson, right out front. And that's what great leaders do. They're out front. People follow you as leaders. It's the same thing in business. When you think about your business today, people are in the business because of you. Just about anyone can get another job elsewhere for at least the same pay. So they're in a business because of you, particularly in terms of startups. So it doesn't mean you can't dip and have a bad day, but you also need to remain motivated and inspire people going forward. So the first thing would be a leader is a person of hope. The second thing is a leader is a simplifier. So a lot of the times your teams will come to you and they'll just tell you this long story. And your role as a leader is to listen to them, reflect on it, and then provide them a really simple summary of what you're hearing and ideally the root cause. Now, one of the things that we have to be careful of is that we don't oversimplify the solution, because a lot of times the solution is a lot more complex than we would expect. So the third area that I just wanted to share with you is that leaders, particularly founders, have this burning ambition and drive, and they have a clear purpose in what they do. And that the power of a purpose is that helps to drive you and make you more resilient. It helps you overcome, it motivates you to overcome those hurdles. Without a passion and drive and that purpose, it's very hard to be a leader. Also, people join a company because of the business's purpose. So really critical that as a founder and a CEO, that you're very clear on the purpose of the company. The fourth point is that a leader must be an avid learner. They must be curious. Now, I think curious is probably one of the most overused words of the last 2 or 3 years, but that's okay. It's a very appropriate word. Leaders have to be curious. They have to be thoughtful. And importantly, they need to reinvent themselves. Early on in a startup, when the team is small, there might be 3 or 4 or 5 people. You're all engineers, you're all techies. You're all very focused on creating a product, and it's inspiring. You're all working together. You're all very similar, which is great fun. As the business grows, your team diversifies. You have different skill sets. You have diversity in the team in terms of age, experience, as well as functional skills. And so as a leader, you need to reinvent yourself and learn how to manage subject matter experts even when you're not a subject matter expert. And that's a real journey that I found a lot of founders, you need help in understanding. The next point I want to raise is that leaders do not make decisions for others. I'd ask a question for you to reflect on. If someone comes up to you in your cubicle, in your office, and they ask you a question, do you just provide them the answer? Or do you say to them, okay, what do you think the answer is? I think a lot of people would know the story of Pavlov's dog. This goes back a long, long time ago, where Pavlov would ring a bell and give the dogs food. And so they then connected ringing a bell with the food. And then he got to the stage where he'd just ring the bell and the dogs would salivate. He trained them to that the bell and the food were connected. You do the same thing with your team. If you provide them a solution every time they come and talk to you, then nothing's going to change. What I'd suggest is a tweak. Just say, hey, great question. What do you think we should do? And if they haven't got an answer, say, hey, come back to me later today and let's have a chat. I really want your view. Now, that doesn't mean you can't disagree with them and say, look, great idea, but maybe this would be a better approach. But you want to train the team that they need to come to you with problems, great, but also ideas of solution. The next one I wanted to stress is great leaders and impactful leaders speak last. Too many times I see leaders, they'll have a meeting with their team and they'll They'll say, this is the problem we're addressing, and this is what I think we should do. The second you put a stake in the ground and say, this is my opinion, you're going to change the opinion of other people in the room. Some people will still speak up and say, well, actually, I disagree, Dane. I think we should do that. But you'll have fewer of those. And in some cultures, particularly in Southeast Asia, people are very respectful of the boss and say, yep, great, let's go in your direction, Dane. So I really encourage leaders, please speak first in formulating and identifying the problem, but speak last in terms of providing your opinion. Provide room for other people to speak up. The last concept that I want to talk about is be aware of your leadership shadow. I actually think this is arguably one of the most important leadership characteristics that all leaders should be aware of. If you're a parent, you know this. You know your children are watching you every minute of every day. The same thing happens in business. When you walk in the office, everyone knows whether you're in a good mood or bad mood within 2 minutes. I don't know how they deduce it, but they know what mood you're in almost immediately. They're watching you for cues. So leadership shadow, another way of thinking about it is effectively positional power. It's a CEO. So I've been in organizations with hundreds of thousands of people. And in fact, I was very fortunate. My last job, I was a CEO of 200,000 people. So I knew that when I was in a room, people were watching me constantly. People knew where I was sitting. People knew who I was talking to. People knew when I walked out of the room. People were watching for cues, who I spoke to, whose jokes I laughed with, who I promoted. My calendar sent a message as well. So your leadership shadow is immense. I really encourage leaders, firstly, to be aware of that. You need to be very aware that you're being watched constantly. And as I say in the slide, use it for good, not evil. An example of that is, as a leader, you don't need to yell. I'm very disappointed when I hear that a leader sort of yells at their team. If you just say, I'm disappointed, that's powerful enough given your position. You don't need to yell and scream at your team. And that's using your leadership power for evil if you're raising your voice for your team. Using it for good is recognition. Recognition is a huge part and very powerful in organizations. So I really encourage leaders and CEOs to recognize their team. It could be a high five. It could be congratulations. Hey, take your boyfriend or girlfriend out to lunch tomorrow and we'll pay for it. Might be a promotion, might be a bonus. Recognition works, and that's a critical part that's a critical lever that you can use in terms of leveraging your leadership shadow. Thank you.
Dane, something which I'd love to know, and I've been to your apartment and it's absolutely beautiful. How did you end up in Singapore?
Well, I've had a privileged life. I've moved country 10 times, moved house 27 times, but I've had the same wife for 37 years, so that's pretty good. Singapore was just one of my many corporate moves. I worked with a company called ISS, Facility Services. I think we've had discussions, Colin, about, I ran the business in Australia, about 25,000 people. And then they asked me to come up to run Asia with about 200,000 people. So I did that for 5 years and fell in love with Singapore. And I got into the startup community and started coaching and mentoring founders for the top VC firms. And so that's how I ended up here, and that's why I've stayed here.
And you've also had multinational experience. You have managed a lot of people, which is extremely impressive. What is it that you learned about managing global organizations that you've been able to take and to apply to the world of startups?
about 8 years ago, I started thinking about, gosh, I've learned a lot, and I've got a great toolkit, leadership toolkit. So I started writing it down, and then after about 3 years, I blinked, and it was 1,000 pages long. And it's built around being a disciplined leader, a change agent, and a hands-on operator. And within those, there's certain modules that I created, and it's based on my experience as a CEO and as a leader over many decades. But then I started working with founders and CEOs, and I continue to update it and make it far more relevant to a lot of the sort of newer leaders, particularly those in the startup space.
Very interesting. And I guess, can you give me an example? So I understand from a large multinational perspective, what is an example of when you've been able to apply that into a startup space of how a person can transform to become a disciplined leader, a change agent, as well as an effective operator?
So you also, in your role, Colin, interact with a lot of great young leaders in the startup community. A lot of the time, those leaders are very chaotic. No offense, but their life is chaotic. They're extremely undisciplined. Their meetings start half an hour late and finish an hour and a half late. They're terrible returning WhatsApp messages, worse at returning email, and also they're going through a difficult time in their lives. Maybe they've got a new partner, a wife or a husband, young children. So there's so much chaos in their lives, and so that I'm a huge fan of bringing discipline into your life. Discipline is required for them to be successful as a leader. So one of the number one things I work with leaders on initially is how do we create discipline in what they do? And it could be something as simple as start your meetings on time, finish your meetings on time, have minutes, have an agenda for the meeting, have KPIs for your sales team, have really clear approaches to follow up with your sales team. So my way of mentoring leaders is, it's a bit like Newton's third law of physics, that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so I try to work with leaders and tell them, if you do this, this will be the outcome. So I try to be really clear, and then we work out what is authentic for them, what makes sense for them. And again, because I've done this over the last 4 or 5 years and worked with a lot of great leaders, I've learned from them. So it's reverse mentoring as well. So I've learned from them how I can change my toolkit. But that's particularly related to the disciplined leader piece, Colin. The change agent piece is more about them thinking really clearly about what their strategy is, what their business model is, what their organisation structure is. I love the approach: strategy, structure, people, and process. And it works in that order. And so I work specifically with these, maybe at a retreat, to help them think through those few characteristics. And then the final area, as you said, being a hands-on operator, that could be how do they lead an HR team? How do they lead B2B sales or B2C sales, etc.? What are some tools that I can share with them that actually short-circuit their journey so they don't have to create things from scratch themselves?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Also, the reason why it resonates so deeply for myself is the Pomodoro technique is something that I implemented, which really helped me. And I know that different entrepreneurs are impacted by different tools or frameworks or methodologies. But when I hear what you're talking about in terms of being a disciplined leader, you need to have discipline across various areas of your life. And that's both your personal life as well as that's your work life, and being able to effectively manage your time. Time management is huge. Being able to prioritize, being able to automate, being able to delegate. I've read quite a lot of books on that. That's helped me. I'm still learning, as I find that delegation automation I'm quite weak on. I do think that I've been able to implement time management relatively well. So this segues me to the topic of books. I personally have been very inspired by a number of books that I have read. Can I ask your opinion on what would you say have been some of the most impactful books on your life, and what has been the most impactful book that's changed your life, and why?
Oh gosh, that's a really easy question. Give me a hard question. My top ones would be those written by Jim Collins. They're old books, I know. That's laughing at an old man. Thank you, Colin. But they're very old. They're old books, good to great, built to last, exceptional books, and they really provided me a great foundation going forward.
What is it in particular that you've learned from Jim Collins that's changed your life?
That is a good question. Well, firstly, life's also about timing, and I think that I was probably in the early stage. It's probably my first C-level role, and I'm an engineer with an MBA, but my first role was actually CFO. My first reasonable sized role was CFO of Pizza Hut Australia, and I was 31 years old, and it was about a $400 million business, so a good sized business. The thing about the role was, again, I'm not an accountant, but I had supply chain, I had store development, I had M&A, I had great commercial responsibilities. And then the Jim Collins books just really hit a mark for me in terms of, also I had strategy, hedgehog principle, look out, and there's a lot of phrases in there that really resonate, or sentences in there that resonate. I think one of his is, look out the window when things go well, and look in the mirror when things go wrong. And what that means is, when things go wrong, look in the mirror. What could I have done differently to actually affect that? And this comes across, you see this all the time in banking, the banking industry. Banking CEOs make a lot of money, but they also get fired quite easily when things go wrong within the bank, that they may not have any idea of what happened, because they own everything that happens, and as a CEO you own everything that happens in the business. So when you're a CEO, you've got to look in the mirror when things go wrong. What could I have done differently? What exception reporting could I have put in place? How do I change things going forward? When things go well, you look out the window. Who can I recognize? Who can I congratulate? And recognition is I think, an extremely underutilized lever for leaders in a business.
Because people want to be appreciated, they want to be recognized for their hard work, and people also work for inspirational, aspirational leaders.
That's right.
You mentioned before that you started your career, so you're an engineer and you've also been a CFO. So you've got this core responsibility where you need to make sure that the financials are good, the technology is good, the product is good. How did you find the transition? Because now you're managing everything and many areas of the business where you hadn't necessarily worked.
So this actually plays well with my third pillar, which is learn how to be a hands-on operator. And it's about asking great questions. If you're leading subject matter experts, you have to learn how to ask the right questions. And this happens, and this is a great journey as leaders. I think when we're younger as leaders, we're probably more authoritative, we're more directive. We're maybe at the top of Adam Grant from Think Again. In his book, he mentions the top of Mount Stupid. So definitely I was the top of Mount Stupid at 31. I thought I knew everything and I was very directive. And this is actually my first CFO role. I was probably too arrogant and too strong. The more senior and experienced you get, you realize that you need to learn to lead by asking great questions. And that's also how you work with subject matter experts. I don't know what an individual might know about technology, but actually I know the questions to ask to go deeper and deeper. And a number of people talk about, I think, the 5 whys. I think it was Simon Sinek. But why? Keep going deeper to understand. And it's great questions that you need to lead subject matter experts.
Yeah. The way that I was taught to do that is Tony Robbins called it third layer questions. It's to uncover the real why behind why a person's doing something. And then speaking of something, because comparing Dane Hudson and Tony Robbins, pretty accurate, something that Dane Hudson taught me is asking the questions so that the person feels like it's their idea, that they own the idea, because then it makes them more motivated. This is something that you've taught me, which I found profound. but can you share that with the audience?
So Daniel Kahneman is another great author. So Thinking Fast and Slow was his great book, but he did sort of an economic psychologist to identify how people think in certain commercial situations. So one of the things that he learned is this principle of ownership, and that if people, the test, I'll start again with this. So the test he did was he asked people to write down the number of a lottery, for a lottery ticket. And so write down a 6-digit number that you'd like your lottery ticket to be. And so he did that with 50 people, and then 50 people just pulled a number out of the hat. When he then tried to buy back those numbers, the people that wrote down the number wanted more money than the people who just pulled a number out of the hat. Now in reality, a lottery is a lottery. You're just as likely to get the winning number if you wrote it down or if you pulled it out of a hat. But it's that principle of ownership. So same thing with teams. People are going to have a far greater sense of ownership of something they create. Now the risk is, particularly say with budgeting, if you ask your team to develop a bottom-up budget, it's unlikely to get you to a number that you have top-down. And that's the trade-off. Do you want great ownership? Then if you want great ownership, then you actually need the team to develop it and play a critical role in the strategy and actually the target number.
Something else which I wanted to ask you is, you work with many startups. I'd love to understand from your perspective, what do you think, what in your view, what do you believe are the factors that hold startups back? So I have a very particular view on this, that it's hiring the wrong people, implementing the wrong go-to-market, or not getting the right leadership at the top, potentially even the mentality of the founder. But this is from my own, especially biased lens. Can I ask, in your opinion, what do you believe are the factors that hold exceptional companies back?
Yeah, so I don't know if I haven't seen any research. I've tried to identify the research in this area, but I have seen that there's some US statistics that 45% of startups fail within 5 years. Now, I'm sure that number is actually closer to 90% because a lot of that only focuses companies that are registered. It doesn't count the number of ideas or 3 or 4 people working in a garage, working in a direct trying to create something. My hypothesis is that definitely the product is a part of the failure, but the biggest part of the failure is the leader. Is the leader not actually thinking about actually how I lead this team, how do I motivate this team? And to your point, Colin, how do I bring in great people to complement me? So when the startups early, I think as I mentioned earlier, they're all engineers, they're all techies, and it's easy to manage. Then the business starts growing and you've got some other functional skills that you need in, and it's something more difficult to manage those people or lead those people if you don't know how. And that also, I hate to use the word again, sorry Colin, but discipline. That discipline and going, okay, let's now create some really good metrics for the sales team. And I mentioned the word before that I wanted to dive in again, Colin, which is consequences. There's got to be consequences for the team. And it could be congratulations, high five, super job. Or it could be, I'm disappointed, this is the 3rd time it's happened, don't come Monday. So I use an example of Coke and Pepsi. Great companies. I actually worked with PepsiCo, and the sales target for the teams that sold beverages doesn't change whether it's a rainy weekend or a beautiful sunny weekend. So they've got to hit their target regardless. And so, if it's a rainy weekend, the sales have to think, well, what can I do differently to hit my target? as opposed to saying, it's a wet weekend, I can't sell Pepsi. So the same thing with leaders in startups is there's got to be consequences with your team. You've got to hold people to account. And if people aren't right, then they shouldn't be on the team.
How important is it for a startup founder to have a coach, and why is it important?
Yeah. Well, clearly I've got a biased answer here.
Obviously you will.
I have a biased answer. But I think the number one point, Colin, is that they need someone in their corner that they can talk to confidentially, and they can sort of let their guard down with that person. And secondly, that they learn how to actually be a CEO, be a leader. Really critical.
And to wrap up, the last question which I wanted to ask, this is a Dane Hudson question. I know that you've coached a lot of leaders, but I'd love to ask you, who was a leader who transformed your life, really inspired you, and why?
Interesting. So I'll actually start with the back end of that, which is who didn't. So I spent 6 years consulting with Booz Allen Hamilton, and I loved it. I loved the job. And I left probably about 18 months short of becoming a partner. And the reason I did that was I looked up at the partners, and there's some very nice people there, but they didn't have the lives that I wanted to lead. A lot of them were divorced. They worked as hard as the associates. There were no role models. And so as much as I loved the work, I thought, I really don't see myself as a partner here. And I've got a lot of friends that still work there, and they changed the culture. So maybe I should have stayed and changed the culture. But that's an example where I didn't have the role models. My favourite job on the planet was Yum Brands, and that was the global owner of KFC, Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. Firstly, I love the product, love fried chicken. But I love the operational aspects of it. I love the stores, the restaurants, the teams there, the marketing piece, etc. And I had a myriad of fantastic leaders there that mentored me. Fred Bowling was the head of HR in Australia, then internationally as well, so he became a peer. Peter Hurl was a fantastic leader there that I learned from. But there were so many phenomenal leaders at Yum Brands that I learned. That shaped me as a leader, as the leader I am today, categorically. Interestingly, I had a chance, I was probably 35 years old, maybe 38 years old, and I'd been with Yum for about 6 years or so. And there was a lot of what's called refranchising, so selling stores. And I looked at buying 35 KFCs, and through a few friends and financing and things. And it would have been a phenomenal investment, but I got talked out of that. And Peter Hurl, my boss at the time, said, "Dane, you have a far greater destiny than doing that." And I'm glad I listened to him. I've had a far different life and a wonderful life. I'm poorer as a result, but I've done okay in life.
Yeah. Fantastic. Dane, every single time I speak to you, honestly, it's a privilege. I learn a lot from I learned so much from it, and I'd openly encourage startup founder that's looking at scaling. I personally am a massive believer of you need to work with a coach. You want to have an advisory board, and you need to work with a coach. You want someone who can help to guide you through the trials and tribulations that come with scaling. You want someone who can be there as a sounding board, because it is true. Being a startup founder, it is quite a lonely journey, and it's quite stressful. You don't necessarily have someone to turn to or to help, but you've got so many pressures that are placed upon you, whether that's financial difficulties, the problems, putting out fires, that just having someone who can be there in your corner, who can help to challenge your thinking, who can really help you to unlock growth. It's something which it hasn't just been transformational in my life. It's been transformational in the lives of many, many others. And I know that it's definitely been transformational in the lives of many of the founders that you have worked with. So as a shameless plug back to you, I'd love for everyone to have a look at Dane Hudson. Please to also reach out and have a chat, because I honestly think that you're absolutely world class. And yet again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to interview you.
Pleasure. Great questions, Colin. Always love chatting to you. Thank you very much for the generous feedback as well.
I've had a number of conversations with Dane. And I mean, it's a topic that I deeply love because you are inspired by some leaders and you're also petrified by some leaders. And I guess it also breaks down because everybody's personality is different. And as a leader, many people have got different leadership styles. So I know that in one regard, leadership shadow, it's people who you resonate with, but also people who you are inspired by. So one thing which I found in general within leadership shadows, people tend to gravitate to visionary and inspirational. All leaders play a different function, and the way that they lead teams is very different. So I guess for me, that's what resonates with me because that's the type of leader that I aspire to be. So I guess what I take out of it is, I guess there's an element of confirmation bias. But also, when you see someone who's absolutely incredible in getting the best out of people, and when you see someone who's horrendous at being able to do that, you're naturally going to gravitate to what it is that's being so powerful, so potent, that you're almost pseudo-conditioned into what good leadership looks like. So I'd say that's my take on leadership shadows. Yeah. through adversity. There's nothing that's going to make you a better leader or a better entrepreneur than having to lead through difficult times or adversity. And that what comes down to is very, very clear communications. It's empathetic leadership. It's understanding the other people's needs. It's also taking an interest in them outside of just a work sense and then feeling like you're very much on their side. But at the same time, when you need to step up as a leader, it's something you need to step up as a leader. You need to be able to provide, as you described, hope. You need to be able to come in and be able to provide that compelling vision of what it is that we're leading the organization to. You know, one thing that I found from scaling startups in Asia Pacific, a lot of people leave large corporations, Salesforce, SAP, IBM, to go and join startups. And something that I've always said is that people join large companies for career progression. People join startups for company progression. And oftentimes they join startups because it's the belief in the leader who's actually driving the startup, both the founders that can potentially be overseas, as well as whomever the regional leader is that's on the ground in Asia Pacific. They've got a massive amount of sway and pulling power in the direction of the company and getting people to be able to buy into their vision and mission. And especially if you're new to Asia Pacific where nobody knows who you are, a lot of the time you're relying on the charisma and the vision and I guess the belief that the leader has in that particular company. So that's also how I would extrapolate that to the situation of scaling technology companies in APAC and the leaders who are building them.
Right, and very good point that you mentioned here as well, right? And you have worked with a lot of startup companies, and some of them succeed massively, and a few of them don't. What are one or two of the qualities you see consistently helps them ace things on top of what Dane said about discipline?
Outside of the usual things that I speak about, that the ones that succeed manage their financials significantly better, the trait that I've seen of success is, number one, there's a few. It's having a leader who joins the startup because the base salary isn't the primary motivation. The primary motivation, yes, they're well compensated, but the primary motivation is the sheer belief in the problem in the world that the company is solving. Because if the leader has that genuine belief, then it's something which just permeates across the rest of the company. It's something which is deeply embedded, ingrained in every single action that they take. And the other one I'd say is they're able to inspire and get the best out of people. I read an amazing book, which is the biography of Sir Alex Ferguson, the former coach of Manchester United, despite the fact that I'm not a fan of Manchester United. But one of the things that had made him so successful is, in the most Scottish way of saying it, he knows when to kick and he knows when to cuddle and he knows when to play people according to their position. The teams that he had weren't always the most gifted or talented teams on the planet. But the thing that he knew how to do better than anybody else is how to play people according to the best possible position for them. So if you take that in the context of, let's say, salespeople are different. Some people are exceptional at doing new business. Some people are exceptional at managing existing business. Some people are exceptional at winning new business that are large and enterprise accounts. Some people just don't have the patience for that and are much better at doing smaller size sales. It's understanding where a person is particularly strong and then being able to play them according to cuddle. It's also knowing how to be able to set the boundaries and the rules that if somebody needs to get the support, you can do that, because some people resonate really well with that. If some people need to have a more dictatorial, authoritarian stance, some people actually, that works better. It's just knowing what are the push and pull levers to pull. What are the best positions? How do we inspire the best out of the person? What are their intrinsic motivators? How can we as a leader be able to guide them to their intrinsic motivators? And also knowing the kind of leadership style to take at different times to be able to get the best out of them. So that's something that, whilst I've learned from Alex Ferguson, I've also learned a lot of that from listening to Dane Hudson.
Yeah, good. I believe I'm starting to see some questions I think the first question is from this person, Pravesh. Let me read out this question. It's always in our nature to quickly jump in with solutions. what are some tips for those aiming to foster independent thinking with the teams? How do they effectively shift from directive, telling people what to do, to coaching leadership? What's your some thoughts?
Pravesh, I'm really, really sorry if I don't give you a detailed answer on this, but the short answer is lead with questioning. Whether it's in sales, whether it's in leadership, in sales, you close a sale not by your statements, but by your questions. It's about asking the right questions that leads the prospect to that answer. It's the same when it comes to leadership. If you want your people to have independent thinking, one thing is basically telling them what to do. Another one is basically guiding them with questions. And something else that Dane Hudson taught both Ming Song and I is if you lead with questioning, and this is the person's authentic and genuine response, because they feel that it's their idea, they're significantly more motivated to be able to do it. So the big shift that I would take in that sort of a circumstance is learn how to be able to lead with questioning as opposed to orders. Ming Song, what are your thoughts?
My own perspective is this. The leader needs to be consistent. If he consistently tells people what to do, this is what I want you to do, and then suddenly he switches to a mode, or what do you think? How will you solve this? And if it's not consistent, people will be confused, right? So I believe strongly in this perspective of leading with coaches, but it can't be implemented for every single people, right, in your team yet, right? Depending on what is the makeup and the structure of your team. And I had to be very intentional when I changed this at some juncture in our own growth. And it's just being very intentional to wear the coach and allow them to own, like you said, own the solution as if they came out with it themselves. And that's how we get things moving.
I completely agree. It's something that I've learned as well. And maybe Ming Song, you and I resonate with it because it's what has worked on us. But I guess I've also had Tony Robbins coaching, and I know that that's very, very much the style. It's people often know the answers, but it's being able to ask the right questions that actually unlock the answer. That's what I've seen work so well. So I hope that we answered your question, Pravesh. The next question is from Sarah. As companies grow, leaders need to change and evolve, but that's easier said than done. Trust me, we know. What's one small practical thing that we can do to make sure that we're growing alongside the company? Ming Song, do you want to kick this off?
Okay. As a leader and I would imagine a first generation founder, because that's what I am. A leader needs to get uncomfortable, right? Needs to get uncomfortable. And a leader needs to accept that what got you here won't get you there. So you have to change a few things. One is to change yourself, just like a chameleon. It sheds its skin at different stages. And allow yourself to understand that your team evolves. The team that got you here will not necessarily be the team that gets you there. And get uncomfortable in that mindset. And while it's very important and have emotional connection with your team, and sometimes letting go is growing. Yeah, that's what I have to add to here.
Yeah, Sarah, what I would add to that is there's an amazing book called Traction by Gino Wickman. The cult that Ming Song and I are a part of, Entrepreneur Organization, it's pretty much gospel within EO to read that book. One thing that they point out is, and I touched on this before, that people have got different leadership styles. So it's knowing what your own leadership style is. The other one that I would say, and this comes from experience, I've worked with large publicly listed companies on the recruitment side of my business, and I've helped them to fill CEO positions. I remember one time when I was working with a publicly listed company that was at about 50 people, and they asked me to fill a CEO role. Now, they're a technology company, and they were looking for CEOs the companies they listed were businesses that are 1,000 people, 5,000 people. But the skill set that they were looking for, the technical skills, very, very unique. They wanted someone which knows how to be able to do technical as well as product. But the thing is, depending on what size of organization that you are, the skills that a leader needs are very, very different. So whether you are a company at 0 to 10, it's very, very different to what happens when you're 11 to 50. It's very different to what happens when you're 51 to 200, and very different to what happens when you're 200 to 1,000. When you're 0 to 10, you're very, very hands-on as an operator. When you're 11 to 50, you're needing to start to put in processes and be able to automate tasks out and delegate. When you're 51 to 200, a lot of the times, a leader actually needs to step back and either focus on one particular area or move up into a board type of role, because the people that you need, the people that have the skills to take a company from here to here, it's very, very different. A person at a 1,000 sized organization is not the kind of person that should be leading a company that's between 11 to 50, because the skill set it's a lot further ahead. It's when a company is a lot more mature in various processes, automation, etc., etc. You need to be able to right size it. So if I was to extrapolate that to us as leaders, it's knowing where you are the best at. And if you're not the right person to be taking the active leadership role, if you're trying to get the company to a certain point, it's also being able to acknowledge that and to bring in somebody that does know how to be able to do that. And that's why I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs in particular, they're like, I'm not the right person to now be the chief operating officer. I'm not the right person to be the general manager. I'm actually going to move up into the board so I can be overseeing and providing advisory or focusing on a particular function. So as the company grows, grow alongside it by learning to upskill yourself, but also don't hold back the growth of the company by recognizing the parts that you're the strongest in and bringing in the leaders that are the best suited for that particular phase of growth. That's my advice.
Totally, right? So hopefully that has helped you, Sarah. The next question we have listed here is, I think both Dane specifically mentioned about the consequences being important. And it makes sense. How do you hold your team accountable without making them demotivated or just constantly worried about making mistakes? You have some thoughts?
You know, this is a really, really good question, because this is actually it's a question that culturally it's different. So Ming Song, you and I probably have some really, really interesting dialogue on this. Recently, I was reading a book called The Venture Mindset, and it speaks about VC companies in the Silicon Valley or the San Francisco Bay Area. And basically, as you all know, San Francisco is one of the hubs of technological innovation. But also one of the things it permeates within the culture, that failure is a good thing. If you're not failing, you're doing something wrong. In fact, the more you fail, the more likely you are to become successful. So one of the things that they speak about, one of the examples they actually list is Amazon, Jeff Bezos. I forgot what product it is that they launched, but it was an absolute basket case. It lost them a lot of money. It just didn't work. And Jeff Bezos proudly speaks about it because of the fact that we tried it, we made a lot of failures, and we got a lot of learnings from it. So it's ultimately how it is that you view it. I know that in places like Israel, in places like America, failing is not something that should be demotivating. Failing is something that should be encouraged, because the more that you fail and you remove all the possible ways to fail, then you become successful. It's like when Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. He failed, I think, 10,000 times in doing it. When they asked him, it's like, okay, why did you do it if you failed 10,000 times? And his response was, I didn't fail. I successfully learned 10,000 ways how not to make the light bulb. So I guess it just comes down to how you view it. But I also know that there is, I guess, different cultures view this slightly differently. Obviously, speaking about it from the perspective of an Angmo, I think this will be absolutely fascinating, hearing this from Ming Song.
I've seen my own learnings evolve over time. At the start of my own entrepreneurship journey, because I'm the operator, I do this, I coach the next person to follow exactly my playbook, to basically just photocopy, right? So at that stage, I was probably very resistant of them failing, because their job is to copy exactly what I had done in the past and succeeded, and just make it happen. So my early days, I wanted them to succeed, and the measure of success is copying, execute well, and there you go. But then this is a group of people who are probably less motivated or less able to innovate, right? So they probably am happy in this stage. But later on, as I progress myself in my own career and my own entrepreneurship journey, so what I did is change the way I instruct and change the way I inspire my team members. And this very recent example of one of my team members, some things that she prepared for, she said everything was good, but on the day that this thing needs to happen, technically she failed. And my natural instinct was, congratulations, right? You've kind of just learned how to be better prepared in future. You've learned an important lesson. And I told her specifically, you're failing fast, that's great. You're not failing on a really big scale thing. And that's preparing yourself for the next stage. And all it really takes is for you to change your mindset, how to recover from the failure. There's 3 things and 3 ways to see and have a perspective of things. The first, I failed, I'm lousy, I'm terrible. Second, I failed, okay, not too bad. I can probably figure how to get better. And the third mindset, and this is what I emphasize to her, you have failed. You're now at the bottom, and the only way to go is up, right? And I'm amazed how I changed my own perspective. And the way I change my perspective will actually change how my team see the way they treat failures. Yeah, so that's my own perspective.
I'll be honest, I just also adding to that, we talk about inspirational leaders. I've rarely seen a leader being able to get the most out of people if they're the kind of leader that is constantly making people feel demotivated. So if you scold people, you need to expect that people are going to fail. And if you scold people for failure, it's hard to make your way back through that. So it's all around how you take it. It's you did something wrong, making them feel bad, or you did something wrong, who cares? No worries at all. Next time you're going to be able to get it right and be able to uplift their spirits. So I hope that answers your question. The next question.
I think that's probably all that we want to cover. So thank you everyone for tuning to this episode of Scaling in Asia. So on your screen, you should see a poll coming up. So help us out by filling up this questionnaire, and it will help us learn from our failures and make the next event better. Right, and if there are some parts of it, or you'd like to get in touch with our speakers, do drop us a note. We'll help you get in touch and help you ensure your own scaling APAC goes really well.